Would my mom have been just like Ruby Franke had she gained the same popularity? This is a question I find myself asking. But before I begin, I do want to put a little bit disclaimer here that one, this is going to be a very hard topic. Two, you should definitely look into the Ruby Franke situation before diving deeper into this video. And three, yes, I am recording in the motel bathroom because they are doing construction outside. I also have some music trying to drown it out. And if you see me open this door and doing this as I'm talking, it's to skip any ads that pop up. So, but for now, let's go ahead and dive right into the beginning of it all. First and foremost, Ruby Franke was a mom vlogger, and specifically a family vlogger. While my mom never had a YouTube and never got into the filming aspects of everything, but she actually was a blogger. You see, back in the day of MySpace, before YouTube was ever a thing, families, specifically more often than not, mothers, would spend some time online creating their own blogs, sharing details of their families, recipes, DIYs, and as well as disciplinary advice. And a lot of them actually started making money off of this. Some of the ways by doing surveys, making their children do surveys and turning those in, doing movie reviews, restaurant reviews, promoting products, trying out new products, doing reviews on that, getting the children's reviews and opinions. And I definitely am under the agreement in a sense that, well, Ruiz Frankie's own daughter has stated herself, I am not here today as just a victim of child abuse, but child exploitation. And I resonate with this so much. And seeing her daughter speak on this brought me to tears, honestly. It is so powerful and moving. Now, before I begin, I want to state that the severity of abuse, especially with the main accusations of the crimes of Ruby Franke, I would not say my mother is guilty of, but I do question all the time, had we reached that fame and fortune, if we would have ended up the exact same way. The reasons I feel this way is because even from a very young age, I felt like our needs weren't being met. I would I am the oldest, and I always felt like as the oldest, it was implanted on me that I have a duty to lead and set an example for my younger siblings. And not only that, but kind of act as another parent, especially once it came to my parents divorcing. I actually remember not long after my dad wasn't in the trailer, my mom was standing outside on the porch on the phone, and I was trying desperately to get her attention. As she shooed me back inside, I saw the scene that I knew was going to play out from the beginning. You see, my brother was trying to open a Kool-Aid packet with a knife. And as I came back inside, he had cut open his hand and I could see his bone. I screamed and ran and cried and got my mom's attention, and she finally decided to come inside to see what was going on. That is when she grabbed my brother, took him to the bathroom, in which I followed. She ran the faucet over his hand. Again, I could see its bone. And she grabbed my dad's shirt, wrapped it around his hand, hung up the phone with who she was talking to, which I believe was my papa at the time, and called 911. This is something that I don't think I can ever forget, and it's not my earliest memory. No, I would say the earliest memory I have is going to the DV shelter, but that's a topic for another day. I felt completely ignored and let down by my mom. And it was in that instance that I had realized I don't think I could trust my mom. She didn't understand the severity of the situation when I had first tried to get her attention, and it made me believe that she wasn't a safe person I could go to, which is why, as a child, I stopped going to her already. But then I started getting frustrated, especially once my mom started making a little bit of money off of her blog, especially when she would do us surveys. And I even asked, what are we getting out of all this? And when we remember one of the surveys that we did came with a little coloring book and crayons. And she said that was our payment, what it came with. Not only that, but I do remember as well her taking us out to movies, being invited to take us to premieres, and in the being paid to write a review from it, specifically our opinions as well. And she did ask for our opinions, and she wrote about it. She wrote our opinions. And I quickly realized around the age of 11 and 12 that we weren't getting any of that money. And it wasn't really coming back to us, because while my brother was sleeping on a futon and we all really needed new shoes, my mother decided that she had enough money to go out on hotel dates and get a new gaming station for my stepdad instead of our basic needs. I actually confronted my mom about this one time and accused her of not caring about us and not doing anything for us. And I even told her that I hated her. And her response to this was to take away my privacy as a punishment. You see, this was before I even had a phone. So, of course, my technology couldn't be taken away because I had none. So instead, my bed was dragged into the front living room near the front door. We would buy windows, excuse you, buy windows that had blinds that didn't come down all of the way. And I had a timing of, I believe, 5 to 10 minutes of bathroom time. My privacy was used as a punishment. If you're familiar with children's basic human rights, that's a longer commercial. If you're familiar with the basic human rights of children, which I'm assuming most people aren't because I just recently learned about them myself, you would know that children do have the basic human right to privacy. And that's kind of one of the things that Ruby Franke had did that set off a lot of alarms from people when it was first even posted about. Even well before the extreme abuse that had occurred. You see, Ruby Franke had punished one of her sons for scaring one of the younger children. That's what he did. He pulled a prank and scared one of the younger children. And his punishment was to sleep on a sleeping bag in the living room, not having any privacy. Honestly, what shocked me the most was people's response to this, because up until that point, I felt that it was definitely wrong for what had happened to me, but I wasn't very understanding of what rights children actually had. And that's when I grew angry because I realized that all those feelings I had, I was right. Me understanding it was wrong, I had even locked myself in the bathroom in protest of the time frame. You are not taking away my showering time and limiting it to so little. It is some of the only peace and quiet I get as the eldest child with so much responsibility. I felt so infuriated and frustrated, and I even remember my mom and my stepdad taking a butter knife to the door and then finally giving up because I kept doing it. I can't remember how long it was, and honestly, I blocked it out for a little bit up until the person who had suggested this punishment, when my mom had posted it online, had came to me and admitted that it was her that suggested it. And all of it came rushing right back. Like, that's right. That did happen. Wonderful. You see, as much as my mom's blog seems to be, because it's still up, not the original one, I don't think, but she does still have one of them up to this day. And I read its entirety and saved it online to the archive. So that way, even if she were to ever delete it, it's always still there on the internet. My mom's blog is filled with a mixture of positivity and self-pity. And honestly, reading the blog, especially when it comes down to her personal details, definitely made me reflect on, wow, I am a lot like my mother. And it scares me, especially as a mother myself. My mom would use gifts and experiences as punishments and guilt trips. Look what I do for you. Other children don't get this experience. We didn't have these things before, but you have them now. You should be lucky. I didn't have this growing up. I didn't have parents that loved me. It is true that my mother was abused. But as someone who has also been abused, I cannot fathom abusing my own children. And that is where we're different. I struggle a lot, especially when I see so much similarities. Even with my surgery and all the weight loss I've incurred, I feel like my smile itself, I see nothing but my mother. And her own words saying, "You are already a better mother than even me," is just infuriating. But it didn't have to be this way. She had a choice. She could have always chosen to be a better mother. But she chose not to be, even to this day. It is infuriating and frustrating to grow up seeing family vloggers like Ruby Franke being criminally charged for the neglect and abuse, while my own mother walks free. In addition to all these factors, I also argue that my mother also medically neglected us. I can remember many instances where we needed to go to the doctor. We were sick. We weren't feeling well. Especially I had my very first fainting spell when I was 14 years old. Take that back. No, it was 15. Almost 10 years ago was the first time I ever fainted. And tell me why. I'm just now realizing that no, I actually wasn't anemic during that time because I've been able to pull some of my records from. And that's not what caused the fainting like I had originally thought. It's the same issue I have now. The symptoms I have didn't begin just recently. They began all the way back in her care. When I had fainted and told my stepdad, he had reacted to the situation in a fairly decent manner. He made sure that I started eating something with protein and vitamins and gave me water to hydrate me, and he relayed the information to my mom. And she did nothing. It was not the last time I had a fainting spell under her care, and I was convinced that I was just anemic. And now looking back at it all, had I gotten to a doctor then, maybe, just maybe, what's going on with me now, still to this day, I wouldn't even be sitting in this motel. Actually, not maybe, more than likely. Because the most likely answer is POTS. That's what we think it most likely is. We're confident I have EDS, and it is a condition that my mother has. You see, that's also another frustrating thing. My mom refuses to relay this type of information to me appropriately. I still don't know all of her disorders and the disorders in her family that she is factually aware of. Even though I legally have every right to know, and it is considered medical neglect to not relay this information. It is infuriating and frustrating that I have to suffer and put my children through this state, my son specifically through this state, not my daughter. She's with her father because of my fainting spells. When this could have already been under control years ago. Years ago. It was always hard in school for me. I didn't run like other kids because I'd feel dizzy. I'd feel faint, and there were times my vision would blur, and it would look like I see nothing but static. And I remember telling my mom about this, and she chose to do nothing. In addition to physical medical neglect, there was also mental. Most of my mental health issues could stem from my childhood, including the lack of proper care. It wasn't until my high school threatened CPS that my mom finally took me to therapy for the first time and to see a psychiatrist. This psychiatrist had given me the diagnosis of major depressive disorder, social anxiety, and prescriptions for medications. I also started therapy, and on my third therapy session, I remember the tone being completely different than usual. My therapist finally asked me how my relationship with my mom was and if I was okay, which was odd because I had never even really spoken about my mom up to that point. And I can't remember the exact words I said, but I do remember that I tried to essentially just gloss over everything. You know, we have a mom and daughter relationship. I'm a teenager. I'm angsty. I've got issues. I actually took a lot of blame. And she relayed to me the reason why she asked was because my mom had kept repeatedly asking for details of our sessions, and specifically if I had talked about her and what I had said about her. And this had given her a red flag because obviously when parents do this, it's because they're scared that their child is going to say something. And this was the last session I had as a minor. I was devastated that my mom had pulled this, especially seeing as I was also excited about the medications and was very willing to give them a try. But when we had gotten into the car that day, she shoved those medications in her purse, shaking her head and saying, "You don't even have a reason to be depressed." To this day, it is those words that haunt me. It is those words that frustrate me. I was bullied a lot throughout my childhood, but it was my mother that was my first bully. It is incredibly frustrating. And I don't. My mother definitely would have gotten to that power trip. I already see it now. She has left my stepdad. She has this new discovery. She believes that she has refound herself. And now she is walking a line of narcissistic behavior, though I fully understand she is not a person with narcissistic personality disorder. She does, ironically, have much too much empathy for that. But that's where it's confusing. For somebody to be so empathetic, for somebody to care so much about friends and say that all they wanted in the world was family, why must you destroy it all? It's struggled me so much, and I understand my mom has her own mental health struggles. She even relayed to me when I was an adult still talking to her before, I think it was during my pregnancy with my daughter, that she actually had been fired as a client from therapists before as being considered too much of a liability. And this is something that actually puzzles me because, to my knowledge, my mom has never made attempts on her own life, but I have. And I have never been fired as a liability. So, on one hand, I wonder, is this the truth or is this yet another lie? Another thing that my mom compares to when it comes to Ruby Franke is this idea that children have to do and be the way and meet every expectations in which the children have. I would say she wasn't as strict as some parents I have seen, and in fact, I would say she was even less strict than my stepdad. However, she had this sense of children being more capable of what people think they are, which is true, and I actually do agree with, but still wavers unrealistic expectations and refusal to understand basic child psychology. Once I got into high school and started doing research on my own within politics and rights and everything under the sun, I started to realize, just as I was doing research, my mother had all these opportunities, especially while running her own blog, to have done her own research and understand child development and each stage and what's normal and what's not normal. And she made the choice not to. Technology is a blessing in a sense, where at our fingertips we can look up our child's age, the development milestones they're supposed to hit, how their brain is physically changing, what their brain is physically capable of, and what they're not capable of. And I am that person that does that, but my mom is not. Even with my sister being a minor still, my youngest sister, I guarantee my mom is not looking and researching and trying to understand, which is concerning to me because she swears she made a mistake and she learned from us. But I feel that I am watching history repeat itself, not as severe as it was with myself and my other two siblings, but it's still repeating. And I constantly wonder if my mom, no, I do know, had my mom blown up on social media, she would have been just like Ruby Franke, if not worse. My mom is the focal point of every therapist I've seen, and even my mental hospital stays, where I go and talk in group therapy and talk with a new psychiatrist about my childhood. Every last one of them is in agreement that what I experienced was child abuse and child neglect. And it's infuriating to me because she still has the chance to make good choices, to literally do the opposite, to just do the research. And she chooses not to. And that's where I argue, in which maybe my mom is slightly, in a way, worse than Ruby Franke was when it comes to the time frame of the two, of severity in their actions, in a sense of Ruby Franke and her vlogging versus when the separation happened. Before that separation, that's kind of how my mom and Ruby Franke were equals on. Except I would say Ruby Franke was also being led by that other woman. My mom did what she wanted, trusted whoever she wanted, and declined whoever she wanted. She wasn't afraid to burn bridges and say no. At the end of the day, we were her kids. She was main custodial, and she had the final say. And she made sure everyone knew that, including my stepdad and my own father. And that's where I think my mother would have been more sadistic. Because I argue, had Ruby Franke not had the aid of that other woman, I keep forgetting her name, I would argue that maybe Ruby Franke wouldn't actually have gone to the extremes that she had done. But I can see my mom going to those extremes, cracking, snapping, out of anger. When it comes to physical punishments, there were a few that stick out in my head. I remember when I was about 5, 6, maybe even 4 years old, my mom would make me eat hot sauce and wash my mouth out with Ajax orange citrus soap. I will never forget that. I remember this upgraded once to I cursed under my breath because my mom wasn't following the rules she had put up of if the chores weren't done right, whoever did that chore that previous day had to redo it. I had complained that the dishes weren't done properly. She told me to just do them. I cursed under my breath that this was BS. And so her response was to slap the absolute crap out of me until my stepdad pulled her off. Not long after I turned 18, one of my biggest regrets of all, I was there in the home when she choked out one of my sisters. She was the older sister, and she was getting close to being an adult herself. And my main concern has always been the youngest sister because she has a lot more years ahead of her. So I had to choose. Do I speak up and risk being cut off and never seeing my baby sister? Or keep quiet? And I chose to keep quiet. Eventually, somebody did see the bruises and report to CPS. But by then, they had eventually healed by the time they got out. And even though there was an admission of what happened, the CPS caseworker himself going by my siblings' own words, stated in other countries their parents would do worse. And they dismissed it without ever talking to me, even though they made sure to mention that I was there. And in that day, it was the only people in the house was my mom, that sister, me, and my friend. And my friend wasn't questioned either. Funny enough, my mom actually had blocked me and kept a distance from me when CPS was involved because she did think it was me until she realized it wasn't. So I was right in a way. But I feel, had I actually been the one to report it, maybe everything would have ended up different. Maybe I could have even prosecuted her myself for everything else that she had done, in addition to that day. Because once one thing opens up with so much force behind it, like the force of my voice, a domino effect would have likely happened, and everything else would have come to light. There's so much, even to this day, where I'll see a family vlogger being reported on guilty of abusing or neglecting their children. And I look at it and go, oh, something similar happened to us, whether it was me directly or one of my siblings. My mom didn't make a lot of money. Realistically, no matter what, there wouldn't have been any money that would have been able to be set away for any type of college or accessibility after 18. But the money should have gone directly to our needs and not to my parents' wants. And that's where it gets frustrating with family vloggers. Because at the end of the day, a child, more often than not, is being exploited. And unfortunately, because most of these parents don't recognize a children's rights, they don't see any of this